Speaking of reliability, a podcast with good friends talking with you about reliability engineering topics. Welcome to Speaking of Reliability. This is Fred Schenkelberg.
And this is Carl Carlson.
Hey, Carl. As we promised in our last episode, we're still working on Tom's question that we played at the start of the last session. Just a quick summary of it was Tom said they wanted, how do I create a reliability program? I need to install a reliability program. And then a little bit more detail was they have a reasonably solid testing program, yet there's an issue with that is that they're finding problems too late, or they're not catching things that they probably should have. And their management team says, Tom, we need to do more reliability type stuff, design for reliability type stuff earlier in the process. So go make that happen is kind of the brief summary of it. And there's more in the last episode about the questions and details that we got from Tom. The last episode we talked about, what's the vision, what's the gap assessment, what are the major decisions, create a plan, trust the process, do the steps. And it's not terribly time consuming, but it's very valuable information by going through those steps. And at the end of that, you get a plan, right? And if you did it right, you've got parts of it are already being implemented. You've got a bunch of people involved in creating and implementing the plan. And now it's time to go make it happen. And I know in the book, that's probably our shortest chapter. And we talk about some of the hurdles you'll run into. We didn't really talk about, well, how do you actually do it? And I think that's where I'd like to go with this episode. But Carl, you may have a different take on that.
A slightly different take. But let me just expand on something Tom said in the speak pipe, which is where to start to build the reliability team, what tools, what failure mechanisms. And then he said, if 1 or 5 added members to the team, what does it add? So I'm going to just build on that a little bit, and I'll share a short story here. One of my favorite reliability plans that I developed, I've developed many over the years with clients. Well, a very enjoyable one was similar to what Tom is encountering here, where I had a good reliability engineer in this company, and they had a really good test program, but they didn't do a lot of the other reliability tools. And what we decided to do, we did the gap assessment, and we understood the decisions, and we did a thorough assessment of what kind of methods might apply. But in putting together the plan, we didn't put a giant mammoth plan together. Mm-hmm. We did a year by year. In year 1, here's the things we think we could do. Basically, we have this one person there that's a reliability person. What can he do that executes some of this? But during that year, he's going to be hiring 1 or 2 people. And what can they do to execute this plan? In other words, what can they be assigned that's part of the plan? Then he can go back to the management and say, here's what we can accomplish with these 2 additional people in year 1. And then in year 2, that was the next part of the plan, which was, we didn't wait for year 2. We said, we wrote it all at the outset. But during year 2, we would accomplish these things because now we have some more staff. We can do some studies. We can get into certain FMEAs and things like that a little better. And by the way, we'll hire a couple more people or whatever is allowable based on the resources that are available and based on the reliability maturity. Mm-hmm. And so then we would go about that year 2 at that point, but he could go to management at the end of year 1 and say, here's what we can accomplish in year 2. And so I think in reading between the lines on what Tom had written on the speak pipe, I think it would be very useful to organize his plan by a rollout and not try to do everything all at once and then go back to management bit by bit. But here's what I could do with 1 person, 2 people, 3 people that fit into the plan that is based on the gap assessment. So that's an initial thought before we get to the execution.
Yeah, I would approach it a bit different. There's no doubt about it. It does take brain power and hands-on things to do it. Yet at the end of the process, I would not want to have a whole team of reliability engineers on staff because it, to me, it keeps you in stage three way too often. Is
Right.
it's the goal is the if you start the plan right from the start to embed reliability in the organization, you can have way more people, way more brain power working on implementing the reliability program than not. And the role of Tom, of a single person, and it doesn't have to be, and I've worked with organizations that it was a quality manager or it was a senior engineer or it was the architect guy that was kind of like, well, I'm tired of working 10 years from now. Let me work on how do we implement the stuff that I came up with 10 years ago. Is you can have the equivalent of 30 FTEs in your team working on reliability stuff, which is, in my opinion, much preferred than having 4 people over there that are called the reliability team, because it inherently sets up this dichotomy of, well, they do reliability. And that doesn't always happen. Some teams are very adept at being the coach and helping people implement it. And I understand where you're coming from, is because there's a lot of work to create the manuals, the guidelines, the implementing FMEAs, doing the plans. Reliability people bring a lot of capability to an organization. Yet there's no reason a mechanical engineer can't set up and run an accelerated test.
I'm going to agree with you, Fred. I think that's a really a good guidance to our listeners, is that the vision is not to end up with a gigantic reliability group.
Yeah.
The you may need a few people to get started and to help seed the process. I've always told my reliability engineers when I worked at GM, let's try to work ourselves out of a job. Let's
Yeah.
get the mechanical engineers, the electrical engineers, and the design groups understanding reliability. Then it'll take a few people to coach the process, to keep it active, that type of thing. But we don't want to build, and that's part of the vision, and that's part of the resources. So I think that's a really important point, that we don't want to create jobs. We want to create reliability.
Yeah.
And part of creating reliability is integrating reliability across the organization. And
Yeah.
so let's make that part of the vision. And then so, but again, if you do have to get some people, you can roll it out in a certain
In a certain way. And
cadence. Maybe in year 3, we let some people go and we
or
say,
you
okay,
move them into design roles
yeah,
and so on. What I'm thinking of is that I agree with the idea of laying it out. Is if you have a solid vision, where do we want to go as an organization on this program and other programs as we increment our way to it, and then create specific plans for each project within the capabilities you have now. And oftentimes, in order to implement a change within an organization, you got to have successes. So limit the scope of what you're trying to change. So maybe that first part is go after this issue with procurement. And then your gap assessment will tell you where the high hitter is, where the big gap is, what you need to fix. And it might be training, it might be different policies, it might be a different way of approaching that problem. It may be as simple as adding another question and having somebody assigned in management that says, I have veto power if you didn't consider reliability. What is it specifically that you can implement, coach, monitor, mentor, get implemented? And then at the end of that year is saying, here is the difference it made. Here's the value that was created by making this specific change. And you might pick 5 or 10 such things. Meanwhile, it's dealing with the day-to-day stuff and the emergencies and understanding how the decisions change and so on, and focusing on those kinds of things. But the idea is that, yeah, you can't boil the ocean. So I think there's 2 parts. One is the gap assessment. What's the big hitters? What are the things that are going to make a difference that you can do quickly so you have a quick win. You can point to that this saved us X amount of dollars or time or whatever is important to your organization, so that you get some momentum within the greater organization. Oh, that was useful. We need to do that again. And then second is look for those champions. Who are the people that get it? Who are the people that say, when we talk about reliability, I've often thought about that. How can I help? And then sign her up and make her a champion. Say she's in the software team and saying, all right, here's some resources, here's some guidance, here's things to ask, here's some tools. But it's more of a coaching role, is find those champions, whether in senior management or in the engineering teams, and light a fire under them, help them, implement and give them credit for it, make them the champions. All those kinds of things are part of change management. And it infuses an organization with, if we do it a little bit differently, we don't have the end of program scramble for all these issues we didn't know about, or we have lower field failure problems. Our customers are happy. Whatever it is, the hard part for the person implemented, in this case Tom, is keeping track of what change implemented created what value, and pay attention to that, because that's gold. Then at the end of the year, it's like, here's what we did. Here's the value created. Here's the plan for next year. We're going to expand it here. Sarah over in software has got these ideas, is going to do this, this, and this. And George in mechanical is doing this, this, and this. And procurement folks have gotten the realm of this, and they're expanding their role of this and asking really tough questions. But I think it's take the wins where you can get them, get some early wins, get the value of them, and find champions, find people that I'm using air quotes here, they get it, that reliability actually makes their job better and easier. And you don't have to call them reliability engineers. They are what they are, but they are concerned about achieving the vision just as much as anybody else is. So give them the credit for them, enable them to do it. I think that's the role I would advocate Tom to take. Is
very, very good coaching for Tom and others. I want to build on something that you were saying here, because I believe building relationships is so important. And there's something different here about design for reliability or reliability testing. You can have a department that does reliability testing, and yes, you need relationships because you got to understand what the requirements are. But it's even more important on design for reliability that you're out there in the organization, working with the design engineers, working with the project leaders, the chief engineers, and not waiting for people to come to you.
Yep.
So when you build a reliability program, we don't want a program where people knock on the door and say, "Hey, I need a fault tree analysis."
And can you do this? Yeah, can you do this for me? Yeah.
Or fill out a work order and then you go do a fault tree analysis. No, it's not like that. To achieve reliability, we have to be in the design process. And so it's very different than some other types of tools. And that's I know you're saying all the right things there, Fred. I think you can get, if we shift to implementation, once you have a good reliability plan, if you've done it well coordinated,
follow the steps, basically. Yeah.
Every step of the way. They've been involved in the vision. They are involved in the gap assessment. They're involved. They help
you identify the decisions,
Yeah. Yeah. And they're involved in the plan. They agree to the plan. They buy in, they give feedback to the plan. The plan becomes part of their project management.
Yep.
If you do those things, the execution rolls out nicely. If
you know better than that.
Okay, that's a little bit okay.
Yeah,
the execution.
No, it's got so much more support. It's got so much more support. It's got so much more grounding. It's got so much more buy-in. Those are some of the biggest hurdles to get anything done. And so there will be hiccups. There will be setbacks. There will be problems. Somebody new will get hired that's got a position of authority, a new director of engineering, and go, "Oh, that's crap. We have good engineers. We'll just design it. We'll be fine." All of that's going to happen. But having that groundwork in place, but building on what you talked about, you got to be out there. I think we did it in the chapter on the gap assessment, basically saying the assessment process never ends. You have to be in the team meetings. You have to be listening for how decisions change, as over the time of the program or project, or as things change in the project itself. You listen to the management teams and have priorities changed. It's be part of the discussions, formal and informally, all the time, and adjust the plan accordingly all the time. And that's a critical role to keep the plan relevant and valuable for the rest of the team. You can't do that sitting in at your desk. You really, really
No, you
have to be
can't.
part of all these other discussions.
You definitely do. Let me just share a story here. It comes to mind when I was at General Motors. We, of course, uh, you had departments that were part of design, but then you had projects like Corvette would be a
Mm-hmm.
project. And so when we had a new Corvette program, they might put in a different type of fuel tank, and so we would have to work with the fuel engineers to make sure they that we could coach them on good practices that would achieve high reliability in that. But I also attended the the regular cadence of project team meetings.
Mm-hmm.
I'd say, okay, here's our plan that we have for the Corvette, for whatever the year next model is. And here's the status, and I need some help here because here's where we are, and we're not, we need this roadblock taken out and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
And that was essential for the traction of execution of the plan, is to be in the meetings where they talk about the design and the assembly of specific projects, and you're there as a reliability representative, and your plan is integrated into their plan.
Yep.
That
You're
just wanted
talking
to
all
add that story.
You're like talking all GM language, roadblocks and traction and stuff like
Yes,
that.
that's right. Well, those
But
stories come back to me, and that's a long time ago, that type of
yeah,
thing. So,
yeah, no, but it's exactly true. I remember early on is I'm a like first year, or not one step above a new hire. Basically, I had some experience, but I was like first level engineer, and I'm attending this program team meeting where there's a program manager running a $100 million project basically, and he's got the rest of the table is the director of software engineering, the director of mechanical engineering. They're all senior managers and have whole teams of teams underneath them, and me. And he said that I asked the program manager one time, why am I here? And he said, one, you ask questions that none of them here think to ask. Will this work? Can we fix that? Here's an issue we ran into, and here's some ideas that are almost always cross boundary, right? If you're not asking, here's the top bug on software today, how did you fix it? They already know that. They're already working on it. But if it's a piece that was part mechanical, part electrical, part software, you get the three of them together and go do it. He says, you're my right hand. You're the only other person here that sees cross boundary, cross departments, cross groups, and does something about it. And says, that's my job, and I'm glad you're doing it for me. Kind of thing. He didn't say it that way, but it was one of the things I learned early on in reliability is that one of our superpowers is that we look at the system as a whole, which very few other people in the organization have the luxury to do. And we can see problems, but more importantly, solutions that are cross department. And building on the relationships and all of the other stuff that we have, we can go work and solve those kinds of things. Unlike other people that are focused on only one silo, one discipline. Not that it doesn't happen with other teams, but anyway, back to the implementation part. Think of it as change management is the real crux of it, is going through the steps and building a strong foundation, and buy-in for the plan is crucial. Second is keep your ears open, attend those meetings, participate in discussions, be aware of changes and hurdles and new information as it comes available, and adjust as needed to accommodate those and solve those problems. And then in and among that process, it's a juggling of coaching, of implementing, of actually working out a test plan and doing it, or creating a derating guideline and working with a few other people to get it implemented. Um, and then the third part is, well, what worked? What actually created value, and what didn't? What do you need to do differently next time? But it's an evolutionary process, and the plan is just a plan. It will change, and it's take the wins where you can and celebrate them, and learn from the things that don't work out well, and keep the it's not keep the pressure on. I don't think that's the right term. How would you phrase it, Carl, if you're trying to coach a team?
Keep engaged.
Engaged. Yeah. Yeah.
Keep engaged all the time. And I completely agree with your comments, because you got to be flexible. You can write a beautiful plan, and then day one it's going to start changing because the situation on the ground changes, and that's so important. I just had one very short comment to make that relates to Tom's the guidance he's getting from his management on DFR. And we talked about it and the importance of being engaged with design folks. I wanted to give a suggestion to Tom and others that are working on the DFR space, which is to get familiar with what's called special design product characteristics and special process characteristics, because that's where design that helps engage the actual design. So I'm going to share a short story, and then we can probably round off after that. The short story is, back in my test days, we used to test door impact beams. And every door in a car has a door impact beam. And we would test them, certain number of samples, and make sure they had the right force displacement curves so that they would survive a crash.
Mm-hmm.
And we would test hundreds of these to get the right confidence levels and things. After a while, it occurred to us, if you design the door impact beam properly, I'm going way back to the 70s, 80s,
Mm-hmm.
Because GM has moved way beyond this and incorporates all of these things. So these are stories that the problems have been solved. But if you design the door impact beam with the right diameter of beam and the right material and the hardness and that type of thing, it will have the force deflection curve you want. And rather than just design it any old way and then test a bunch of samples, the special characteristic might be the diameter of the beam or the material composition, that type of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And if you control those, you'll achieve not only force deflection curves, you'll achieve reliability, because it'll work over a certain number of years and cycles and that type of thing. And so I just wanted to give a tip that one of the ways to get traction inside of design groups is to work with them and help them identify the right product characteristics that achieve high reliability and performance.
Yep.
I wanted to
Yep.
share that story.
No, it's an excellent one. And it also builds a platform for your design guidelines, and using the tools you have. Now most design teams have simulation tools and finite element and spice models built into their systems that they can use in their designs. But creating that notion of, I think I call it critical equality. It's got various names.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It's identifying those helps prioritize and focus things, but it also helps go from program to program. Here's what we've learned, and again, be flexible, because in 5 years that material may be outdated and we got way better stuff today to work with. It's keeping focused on what is it we're trying to achieve, and then use the tools you got to go do it. And that's part of design for reliability is, what works and doesn't work. You don't have to reinvent it every time.
Exactly. So rounding this off, I mean, as you've said, Fred, and you had a good summary there as well, is if we do the steps of the process and trust that you'll get to where you need to get. Be flexible, be engaged, stay engaged, get a good plan in place, and make sure that management and the stakeholders are involved throughout so that execution actually happens. That's the way to build a reliability program. So the answer to Tom's question, in my opinion, is to do these steps, but do them really well. And the way we're describing, being engaged throughout the organization, that type of thing.
Yeah. No, exactly. So I'm looking forward to how it turns out. We'll have to give Tom a shout couple, 6 months from now and see how
exactly.
it went.
How are you doing on that? Let's get another podcast
right.
going.
Yeah. Well, if you've got a question, if you're facing a task or a project like this, or slightly different, like let's say you have the opposite, you got a good design for reliability part, but very bad testing, or some other aspect that's bothering you, let us know. We got all excited when we got this voice message, because we can actually include it in the show with your permission. So let us know. Head over to accendoreliability.com/go/SOR. And there's a button there. You can leave us a voice message, or you can leave us a written message there. Carl and I and the other hosts are available through LinkedIn and our About pages. So plenty of ways for you to get in touch. We'll endeavor to get you an answer or idea or suggestion or some resources, whatever, to get you started, and then we'll probably talk about it and probably have to update our responses to you, let you know what we thought through a little bit more.
All right. Well, very good. I appreciate the conversation. It was a lot of fun, and I hope everybody enjoyed it.
Oh, I suspect we're going to do number 3 or 4 on this one. But anyway, thanks, Carl. We'll talk to you again real soon.
Talk to you soon, Fred. Thank you.
Take care. Bye-bye. Thanks for listening to Speaking of Reliability. We invite you to join the conversation. If you have a question or a topic that you think we should discuss in a future show, please let us know. You can find a comment box below the episode show notes, or just leave a note as part of a review on iTunes.